in favour of Saddam Hussein? No, they're against Western bombs, and that's the point that needs to be made, I think.
Thank you very much. Do we have a question here?
Yeah, thanks, it's really interesting in viewpoints and conversations. But I wondered what you thought about foreign intervention when it comes to regimes in cases like Sierra Leone or in Rwanda, when a foreign intervention might have been, well, was asked for as well, and wasn't given. In Sierra Leone, foreign intervention did come and potentially brought stability to a country that was in chaos for a long time.
Alistair?
I just wanted to make a point about the kind of trajectory of the war on terror and the things that it's fusing with in terms of proxy wars in Africa and responding to the democracy movement of the Arab Spring. Because it seems to me that you look at the invasion of Iraq, planned a year in advance with policy documents going back 10 years or whatever. And the wars now, everything seems so much more chaotic and reactive and opportunistic and so on. And I think that, the speakers described it right, particularly Chris, that it's kind of, the war on terror is fragmenting, diversifying, spiraling out of control. But the danger is that it can also, that process can come full circle and we'll get we've already had direct, interventions, ground troops in Mali and so on, but it becomes something absolutely massive, like a war in Iran, for example, or a much more major war on an African country. And we've already seen those tensions with ships moving to the Gulf around Iran and so on. And most wars do start in this way accidentally, and so I think we have to see that kind of arc. That although these wars have gotten more kind of insidious and maybe more kind of clever, that we're building a movement that in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, 2 years' time may have to confront something like that. In terms of the question you mentioned about when can these, are there situations when these interventions can be warranted? I don't know the history of intervention in Sierra Leone, but I just think that the fact is we get these messages from the media saying we've got to do something, we've got to do something, but the worst thing that can happen is for our government to, given their track record and given their nature, to intervene. So it's in a way, it's like stopping the worst possible thing. And the fact is, we don't have a force that can intervene militarily. Like the guns, the army is controlled by the wrong people, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm not a pacifist. Like I do support, the idea of people going to fight against Franco and the Spanish Civil War seems a positive thing to me, but we're not in that. It's a different framework in this historical moment right now.
Yeah.
I just wrote about the relationship, the new relationship between the US and Algeria, and recently today I wrote an article in New York Times about the US ambassador in Algeria. Is preparing official application to work out with the drone inside in the Algerian territory against the militants in South Algeria, and the program mainly is just to share information with the Algerian government, but I don't know if it could be in very great interest for the Algerian government to just work with America for this case, because the Algerian public opinion, even since 20 years now, are very anti intervention, even when we can see just 1 month ago with the French intervention, and it was just question to let sorry for my English, to let just the French fly through the Algerian territory, and I don't know if you are you know about those kind of relationship between Algeria necessarily in the UK and the US, and you can just add some information about that.
Just take one more question.
Yeah, my question is for the sister over there and for in general the panelists. I think the panelists need to understand how China operates in Africa. China is just as imperialist as the West, so we need to understand that. Their trade in Africa is just about bringing their own people to work in Africa and exploiting the African masses. And the question to you, sir, is do you think democracy is good for Africa, or is it a tool for destabilizing Africa?
Yep, if we can just bring it back to the panel then, please.
Yes, foreign intervention cannot be acceptable. I don't know, the case of Sierra Leone, I don't think that foreign intervention, was it Sandline or whatever, get involved, if that's the type of foreign intervention you are talking about, I don't think was welcome. I think that the African countries are capable of cooperating among themselves today in be able to defend, collectively defend the continent. And I would think that all other international forces should find a way of cooperating or strengthening that cooperation among the African countries instead of other forces intervening with arms into the various countries. I always say that these days Africans have come all the way to join the armed forces in the US, to join armed forces here, they take them to Iraq, they're able to fight. So then they can be able to fight in their own countries if they can come and be fighting the US armed forces. There was the recent publication about the contribution towards West Africans towards the Second World War, towards the victory in the Second World War. So then why I told you, should we need some other kinds of human beings to come in before we're able to solve these problems? So foreign intervention, I don't think that it's permissible. I always look at things this way. In the world, there are forces which the ruling Western governments, they have forces that they work with. There are also the public opinion, the masses, the positions in the West, the progressive forces. I don't think that capitalism is a global system. So class allies exist everywhere. But I think that there can be solidarity across the board, if that is what we are talking about. That one, yes, we can solidarize with our class allies when we find those conditions. But clearly, the situation in which we are having powerful Western countries intervening because they have control over arms and intervening in various countries is not acceptable. The issue about China. In fact, there's a lot of talk about Chinese are providing better conditions for the Africans and that there's a choice. I think that the ideal situation is for Africa to be in control of its own resources. That is the ideal condition, for Africa to be involved in control of its own resources. And not for democracy in Africa to be homegrown, not dictated from anywhere, whether from east or west. And that, I'm also not very, I know people in the progressive movement talk up China's role a bit, but when you know the role that China is playing, or Chinese are playing in illegal mining and other kind of things which we from African countries see, then we have to be a bit critical of what is happening. And in fact, for me, I see that we have to be critical of the competition between the two sides, and that Africa is not there for anybody to take. Africa has to be in control of its own resources. Yeah, those are the questions that I was going to.
Okay, I'll be very quick. I mean, I think when it comes to the question of intervention, you do have to look at the question of motivation, really. And you know, foreign policy, Western foreign policy, is determined entirely on the basis of realpolitik. It's determined on the basis of the interests of power projection, corporate control of resources, and weakening opposition, any opposition that might exist to those things, and that's the truth. And you know, there isn't a moment when in Whitehall or the Pentagon, the army chiefs who've been, you know, killing millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people across the Central Asia or the Middle East, suddenly say, oh, you know, I'm really worried about the people in Rwanda or the people in Sierra Leone. They will use those situations, and they'll, you know, provide a rhetoric of humanitarianism, but their interest fundamentally will be to further the you know, corporate power and further the power of their own state in competition with others. And therefore, you know, I do think that it's right to say that you know, we have to oppose Western intervention on that basis. I mean, they talk about Syria as if they support, you know, democracy in Syria. 200 miles further east, they're backing the Qatari regime as it crushes opposition on the ground. They're backing the further south. They're backing the Yemeni government as it extinguishes all opposition. They pump millions of pounds and billions of dollars every year into the Saudi regime, which is one of the most brutal regimes in the world. So I think we always have to unpick this humanitarian rhetoric and say, unfortunately, I mean, it sounds, sometimes it can sound crude, but it's actually not crude. It's consistent and logical that these people are operating in a particular way for particular interests, and they will do that in every country in the world. And so I don't believe that any progress or I mean, it's heartbreaking at times to see situations where terrible things are happening, but it's also true that every time that we give in to this idea that, you know, Western intervention can solve problems, actually they get, in the end of the day, by and large, the problems are deepened. On the question of democracy, I mean, I'm a Democrat in principle. I believe in popular control over society, and I don't think that's a kind of, you know, culture or geographically specific notion. That's a universal as far as I'm concerned. I think that the more ordinary people control in a real way, not just their kind of, not vote every 5 years for a government, but actually control their communities and the resources in them and make collective decisions, the better. That's my opinion. I know that the Western powers use democratic rhetoric and sometimes use kind of you know, fix elections or propose and kind of you know, construct situations where they think they can have elections that will get their own people in, but that's and obviously that's a kind of false democracy that they use in order to further their own interests. But I don't think we should allow them to have the democratic thing in their pocket. I think we should say we want to define democracy, we want to have democracy, we want it to be as deep as possible, and we want it to be about ordinary people running their own work, their own life. I mean, I agree with you. I think we should be against all forms of imperialism, all, you know, imperialist poles, including the Chinese. I think we concentrate on London and Washington because that's where we are, really. I mean, if I was in China, I'd be spending most of my time arguing against Chinese imperialism or Chinese intervention and so on. It's not, I mean, at the moment, it's not...
That's where we should be internationalists.
Yeah, absolutely, we should be internationalists. I mean, clearly Chinese imperialism isn't anything like as bloody as, let's be honest, at the moment, as US and Western imperialism, but it can move down that road. And I think we should be, I agree with you entirely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Expo said in terms of the key issue here is about Africa controlling its resources and determining its own future. And I think the absolute number one main obstacle to that at the moment is what the West is doing in terms of, you know, the drones, all the military attacks, the war taking place in Mali, and obviously David Cameron's pledge to spread war across Africa for the next decade. And I think, you know, I agree. I think, you know, China has got a complicated relationship with Africa, and it's not without its problems, definitely. But it's not militarily trying to oppress Africa through military means. You know, there's economic relationships which, you know, I agree they're complicated, but it's offered a choice for African nations, which I think is a positive thing. It's better than just having to deal with the United States and the World Bank and the IMF. So I think to that extent, opens up some doors. But I'm not saying it's without any problems and stuff. But I think the main issue is the military intervention of the United States and Britain and France at the moment, which is, you know, you're causing huge problems, loss of life, and, you know, stopping, you know, ultimately trying to steal resources like oil in Libya, all the resources in Mali, and trying to stop Africa developing. So I think that's the sort of main task for us, is to stop the West doing that.
Thank you very much. That's the end of our meeting today. I'd just like to thank everybody who's come and listened to the discussion and points that have been made. Just to end on, I'm just going to make a quick announcement. Have you got any announcements that you want to make?
Chris has already said it about the just putting a diary, protests against the drones, the drone states, so set up in this country.
Okay, brilliant. And just one more really pertinent announcement about the Shaka Ama campaign. Shaka Ama, the last British resident in Guantanamo, who's been imprisoned without charge or trial for 11 years. He's been cleared under the Bush and Obama administration. We must ask ourselves why Shaka remains in Guantanamo. The e-petition that's going on at the moment, www.freeshaka.com, is asking for the Foreign Secretary and the Foreign Office to obviously transfer Shaka back to the UK. And again, thank you very much.